It's easy to think of Elvis as a sure thing, the king, a guy who never failed. But that's not the real story. The real story is about a man who got lost, completely lost. And it was the commercial failure of one specific song that, strangely enough, showed him the way back. It's a story about how hitting rock bottom can be the best thing to happen to you. By the mid-1960s, Elvis was not a musician. He was a product. He was trapped in Hollywood making 3 movies a year. The movies were all the same. He played a race car driver, a boat captain, a pilot. He'd meet a girl, get into some light trouble, and sing a few silly songs. The films were cheap. The scripts were terrible. And the songs were even worse. Think about the music of that time. The Beatles were releasing Sgt. Pepper's. The Rolling Stones were singing about street fighting men. Bob Dylan was changing the meaning of songwriting. Jimi Hendrix was setting his guitar on fire. Music was exploding with new ideas, new sounds, new anger, and new hope. It was raw and it was real. And what was Elvis doing? He was singing to the clan. He was singing about yoga. He was serenading a bull in one movie and singing to a pack of dogs in another. It was a joke. He knew it was a joke. The whole world knew it was a joke. He had become a caricature of himself. The dangerous, sneering rebel of the 1950s was gone. In his place was a smiling, clean-cut movie star singing disposable tunes. He was rich, he was famous, and he was miserable. He was living in a golden cage, and the bars were built by his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. The Colonel was a brilliant promoter, but he was no artist. He saw Elvis as a brand, a reliable moneymaker. The movie formula worked. It made a predictable profit every single time. Why mess with it? The Colonel's philosophy was simple: don't take risks. Keep it safe. Keep it bland. Keep the money rolling in. Elvis felt the world moving on without him. He would sit in his mansion in Memphis, listening to the radio, hearing the powerful new music coming out of Stax Records in his own hometown. He heard Otis Redding. He heard Wilson Pickett. That was real music. It had soul. It had grit. It was everything his music was not. He was an artist dying of boredom. He was a singer who barely cared about the songs he was singing. He would go into the studio, knock out a movie soundtrack in a couple of days, and then go back to his life of isolation. He was getting overweight, he was getting lazy, the fire was gone. Then, one day in 1967, something happened. He was in Nashville for a recording session. The plan was the same as always. A record, a few forgettable songs for the next movie soundtrack, maybe a weak single for radio. It was just another day at the office. But one of the guys in his crew, a guy named Red West, brought him a record. And he told Elvis he had to hear it. The song was different. It wasn't a pop song. It wasn't a goofy movie tune. It was a swampy, bluesy, funky piece of country storytelling. It had a sound he hadn't heard before. The guitar part was complex and dirty. It had a chugging, relentless rhythm. The lyrics told a simple story about a guy with a guitar traveling from town to town, playing in rough bars and juke joints, just trying to make a living. It was a story about the life of a working musician. It was honest. Elvis loved it. He listened to it over and over. This was it. This was a real song. It was the kind of music he grew up on, the kind of music he fell in love with in the first place. It had blues, it had country, it had soul. It felt like him. For the first time in years, he was excited to record. He told the producer he wanted to cut that song. Right now. They got into the studio. The session musicians were the best in Nashville. They were called the A-Team. These guys could play anything. They were professionals. But they couldn't get this song right. They were too polished, too clean. They played it perfectly, but it had no life. The gritty, swampy feel of the original record was gone. The magic wasn't there. Elvis got frustrated. He knew what it was supposed to sound like. He could hear it in his head. But he couldn't get the band to play it. The producer, Felton Jarvis, was getting nervous. Studio time was expensive. The Colonel wouldn't be happy about wasting money trying to get some weird song right. He suggested they move on, maybe come back to it later. But Elvis stood his ground. This was a rare moment of him taking artistic control. He said no. He told them they were missing the key ingredient. He looked at the producer and said something that would change the course of his career. He said, "Find the guy who played guitar on the original record. I want him." The guy's name was Jerry Reed. Reed was a Nashville character, a brilliant songwriter and an even better guitar player. He had this unique, syncopated style of picking that people called clawhammer. It was intricate and funky at the same time. He was the guy who wrote the song and played on the original recording. They called him up. Jerry Reed thought it was a prank. Elvis Presley wanted him to play on his session. He didn't believe it. But they convinced him it was real, and he came down to the studio. He walked in, a little intimidated, holding his nylon string guitar. Elvis walked right up to him. He was a huge fan of the record. He asked Reed how he played that signature guitar lick. Here, Reed showed him. And then they started to play. Like, the whole mood in the studio changed. With Reed playing that chugging, infectious rhythm, everything clicked. The other musicians locked in. The song came to life. It was raw. It was loose. It was real. And Elvis came alive too. He wasn't just phoning it in. He was leading the band. He was laughing. He was sweating. He was working the song, pushing it, feeling it. He sang with a power and a grit that nobody had heard from him in years. When they finished the take, everyone in the control room knew they had just captured something special. It was pure magic. It was the sound of Elvis Presley remembering who he was. They knew they had a hit. This was the one. This was the song that would put him back on the map. It was so much better, so much more authentic than anything else on the radio. RCA Records rushed it out as a single, and it failed. It completely bombed. The song entered the Billboard charts way down at number 69 and then quickly fell off. Radio stations wouldn't play it. To them, Elvis was the guy from the Beach movies. They didn't know what to do with this gritty country funk track. It didn't fit into any neat category. It wasn't pop, it wasn't rock, it wasn't country. It was just different. The public, who had been fed a steady diet of silly Elvis movie songs for years, was confused. They didn't buy it. For the Colonel, this was proof, see? This is what happens when you try something new. This is what happens when you stray from the formula. The fans want the movie Elvis. They want the safe songs, the experiment was a failure, back to the movies. For Elvis, it must have been devastating. He had finally found a piece of music he truly believed in. He had fought to get it recorded his way. He had poured his heart into the performance. Now, he had created something he was proud of, and nobody cared. The world had moved on. Maybe he really was finished. It was a crushing blow. It seemed to confirm his worst fears that he was no longer relevant. The failure of this song pushed him deeper into his creative depression. It was the final confirmation that the system was broken and he was trapped inside it. A year went by. More bad movies, more bad songs. Elvis was at his lowest point. Then, an offer came in for a television special. It was meant to be his first live performance in front of an audience in over 7 years. The Colonel saw it as a simple, safe way to make some money. His plan was for a traditional Christmas show. Elvis would stand there in a tuxedo, surrounded by poinsettias, and sing a bunch of Christmas carols. It was the Colonel's dream safe, bland, and profitable. It was Elvis's nightmare. It was everything he was trying to escape. But the network hired a young, ambitious director named Steve Binder. Binder had no interest in making a cheesy Christmas special. He saw an opportunity to do something revolutionary. He saw the fire that was still buried deep inside Elvis. He wanted to reintroduce the real Elvis Presley to the world. The dangerous one. The one who changed music forever. Binder and Elvis started talking. They spent hours together just listening to music and sharing stories. Binder didn't treat him like a product. He treated him like an artist. He asked him a simple question: what do you want to do? No one had asked Elvis that in a long time. Elvis told him about the music he loved. The blues, the gospel, the early rock and roll. He talked about how much he missed playing with a real band in front of a real audience. Binder listened, and he came up with a new concept for the show. No cheesy sets, no dancers, just Elvis, a small band, and his music. The centerpiece would be an informal jam session style performance. Elvis sitting in a leather suit, surrounded by his old bandmates, just playing the music that moved him. It would be raw, stripped down, and honest. The Colonel hated the idea. It was risky. It was unpredictable. But Elvis, for once, stood up to him. He was tired of being a joke. He trusted Binder. He wanted to do this. He was ready to take a chance. Now they had to decide how to open the show. The opening number was crucial. It had to make a statement. It had to announce, from the very first note, that this was not the movie Elvis. This was something new. Or rather, something old and powerful being reborn. So Binder and Elvis talked about what song could capture that feeling. What song represented the real him. The musician, the artist, the guy who was lost but was now finding his way back. And they both landed on the same idea. They chose the song that had failed. It was a bold, almost defiant choice. They were opening a multi-million-dollar television special, his one shot at a comeback with a song that the public had already rejected. A song that had been a commercial flop, but it was the perfect choice. The failure of the song on the radio didn't matter. What mattered was what the song represented. It represented authenticity. It represented his brief moment of artistic rebellion in that Nashville studio. It was the first step he had taken on the road back, even if that step had stumbled. Using it to open the show was a declaration of independence. It was him saying, "This is who I am. Take it or leave it." The show aired in December 1968. It opened with a dramatic, tight close-up on Elvis's face. He looked incredible. He was lean, hungry, and impossibly handsome. The sneer was back. He stared into the camera, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. And then, the music started. That chugging, swampy, unmistakable guitar riff filled the air. He opened his mouth and sang the story of a traveling musician, a boy with a guitar, trying to make his way. The performance was electric. He wasn't just singing the song, he was living it. It was his story. He was that guy. He was the kid from Tupelo who had a guitar and a dream. He had gotten lost in the Hollywood machine, but now he was back, playing the music that mattered. The rest of the show was a triumph. The leather-clad jam session was one of the most iconic performances in music history. He was funny, he was sexy, he was self-deprecating, and he was powerful. He sang blues. He sang gospel. He sang his classic rock and roll hits with a raw energy they hadn't had in a decade. He closed the show with a powerful new song, If I Can Dream, a plea for peace and understanding that was miles away from Do the Clam. The special was a smash hit. It was the highest rated show of the week. The critics raved. They said Elvis was back, but he wasn't just back. He was reborn. He was relevant again. He was cool again. He was the king again. The failure of that one song was the catalyst for it all. If the song had been a modest hit, the Colonel would have used it as an excuse to keep things the same, to just slightly tweak the formula. But its complete and total failure was a shock to the system. It proved that the old way of doing things was finished. It drew a line in the sand. For Elvis, it was the final insult that woke him from his slumber. It forced him to realize that if he wanted to survive as an artist, he had to fight for it. The song's failure made its use in the TV special all the more powerful. It became his anthem of rebirth. The show gave him the confidence to quit Hollywood for good. It led him back to Memphis, to the American Sound Studio, where he would record some of the greatest music of his career, Suspicious Minds, In the Ghetto, Kentucky Rain. It led him back to the stage, to Las Vegas, where he redefined the live concert experience. The entire second half of his career, his true comeback, started with that TV special. And that TV special started with one song, a song that radio wouldn't play and the public wouldn't buy. A song that was, by every commercial metric, a complete and total failure. But it was also the most successful failure in music history. It was a song that reminded Elvis Presley who he was. It was the sound of a key turning a lock, opening the door of that golden cage and setting him free. The song that failed, the song that saved him, was Guitar Man.